This, of course, is the area of the problem with which Marshall McLuhan is very largely concerned. For he has pointed out that just as the wheel is an extension of the feet, and as beyond the wheel naturally comes the horse and carriage, the automobile, and the airplane, all these technological creations are extensions of the human organism. And finally, the electronic network of telephone, telegraph, radio, and television is an extension of the nervous system. And into that we must throw, as an additional extension of the nervous system, the computer. The computer into which data can be fed from the files of the insurance companies, the Internal Revenue Service, the police, the credit agencies, everything. So that in a matter of seconds, when an individual is identified, an enormous amount of information about him can be instantly known. In a rather similar way, the time is not too far ahead when you will be able to have a box about so big on your desk, which has a little screen on it and a dial. And after dialing a key code, you will dial the catalog number of any book in the Library of Congress that you want to read. And at any rate that you wish, the spread pages of that book will appear on your television screen. And you can get it right like that. When we get to television worked with the agency of laser beams, you will of course be able to see solid three-dimensional images in color projected in a certain area, and you can walk around it. I haven't discovered yet whether you can kiss it. But when you get a phenomenon like that, it begins raising the question of where somebody actually is. When the reproduction becomes technically perfect, you see, you won't know the difference between the reproduction and the original. That's going to be a new kind of confusion. And we will perhaps even be able to think about the word reproduction in a new sense. We say now one of the meanings we give to the word reproduction is sexual reproduction of the species, or the biological method. Then we have reproduction through photocopy and all that kind of thing. Let's suppose, too, that we begin increasingly to be able to manufacture the parts of the human body in very perfect kinds of plastic, so that when your heart goes wrong or your kidneys go wrong, the surgeon will simply replace them with a plastic reproduction, which will work equally well. And perhaps they'll never be able to reproduce in plastic the brain, but they can at least put in there a radio device which will connect with a computer system of some kind, which will do the same job. So that then, after the years go by and your parts have been replaced, the serious question arises as to, are you the same individual? And we would say, well, no, you've been entirely replaced.
But that happens normally.
Of course it does. You're being replaced all the time, though by a different method. And just as, say, an institution like the University of California, which is a very rapidly changing university, if for some mysterious reason it remains the University of California, recognizable as such, even though the students, the faculty, the office and administrative staffs, and the very buildings themselves are in a state of flux, so that they hardly remain a constant for 5 years in succession. What then is the university? The university is a pattern of behavior. And the organisms involved in that pattern keep changing, but the pattern retains an identifiable continuity. So does your body. So does the whirlpool in the stream. So do the hot springs down below, although the water is running through them all the time and is never the same. So you can envisage the reproduction of the human being in this electronic way, and at first you say, oh, horrors. Are we going to be converted into nothing but plastic replicas of ourselves? Will we be there in any sense anymore? Will the soul survive it? But you see, in the case of the University of California, it is what we call the University of California that is the soul. And its bodily expression keeps changing. So, when we find out that we are electronic echoes of ourselves, being perpetuated through the ages, we shall come to the astonishing conclusion that that's what we already are. Only we have to do it again ourselves in order to realize it. We are already the most remarkable electronic patterns from the standpoint of physics. So let's a bit lay that bugbear to rest. Although I must say, there is something about plastic in its present stage of evolution that is somewhat repulsive. There is a state of consciousness which those who are psychedelically hip or hep call the plastic doll, in which everything looks as if it's made of plastic, as if or patent leather or enameled tin, that it only reflects light and has no light inside it. There is another side to the vision whereby everything becomes living jewelry with light inside, a kind of beatific vision as distinct from a diabolic vision. And at the present stage of its development, plastic always suggests the diabolic vision. But it is through the diabolic vision that you gather the deepest insights. It's really profounder than the beatific vision in a certain way. Because if you can go down into any experience, I hope you understand the meaning of this phrase, go down into. It's very important. It means exploring a certain sensation or a certain feeling to find out all its implications, to find out what it is at root that you like about it or dislike about it. And you will find, if you explore the plastic doll vision sufficiently carefully, that it will bring about in the end a far greater depth of bliss and realization than merely exploring the things that are lovely at first sight, obviously so. So one should think about this funny thing of technology considered as artificiality in the light of the realization that there really is nothing artificial. You might say the distinction of the artificial from the natural is a very artificial distinction. That the constructs of human beings are really no more unnatural than bees' nests and birds' nests and constructs of animal and insect beings. They're extensions of ourselves. So then, what about the situation when it arises that we are all computerized, that no one is hidden? I want you to notice something already about the Bell Telephone Company. They have a regulation whereby you cannot switch your telephone off. You may have an extension in the house and you may switch that off. but you may not switch off your main phone. And if you leave it off the hook, it starts screaming after a while. They project that not many years hence, the ordinary telephone will disappear, and every individual will carry around with him a thing about the size of the old pocket watches. One side of it will be a TV screen and a speaker. The other side of it will be a set of buttons, over which you just place your finger to activate them. You will be able to dial world information, who will give you the number of any given individual. If he doesn't answer, he's dead. So under such circumstances, absolutely no one can get lost. And then you see, as this moves on, let me develop some of its further possibilities. People like Toynbee and McLuhan have noted that as technology progresses, there enters into it a quality of what they call etherealization. And this is connected with Teilhard de Chardin's doctrine of peduncles. Peduncles aren't exactly relatives. And we have to understand first the doctrine of peduncles. Now, here it is. Here is a globule. It might be an amoeba, or it might be oil in water suspended. And this globule is going to separate. First, it does this. Then it does this. Then it does this. And then it does this. See? Now, these things here are peduncles, from the Latin root pes, pedis, meaning a foot. Some sort of protrusion out of a globular body. So notice then that the production of a peduncle, here in the form of a connecting neck, and here in the form of little tails when the neck is broken, that in the course of the development, when we reach this stage, the peduncles have disappeared. According to de Chardin, this is why we do not find missing links around in the evolutionary process. They vanished in accordance with the law of peduncles. Now, in exactly the same way, the human technology sets up certain kinds of peduncles. A road, for example, or a railroad is a peduncle, because with the development of automotive traffic, truck traffic, the railroads become increasingly obsolete. And there are rusty old tracks lying all over the country that are not used anymore. And then with the development of aircraft, the road tends to become obsolete. With the development of radio, the wire as a connection, as a peduncle, becomes obsolete. So that more and more, the connecting links that we saw in a visible way disappear with the development of more expert types of communication. We can easily take this a step further. When we develop a form of electronic communication such that you don't even need to take a plane. You want to see, supposing I want to see my father in England. We both have these laser beam TV jobs, and just like that, I can recreate in front of him myself and my exact environment, everything around, just as if he was sitting in the room. And I can do that with his set on the other end. So that eventually we don't need to take the plane. You can conceive, as some science fiction writers have, what seems to us a rather appalling situation, where you never need to leave the place where you're sitting. All food supplies and everything are automatically delivered. You just dial what you want, and some kind of mechanical process transmits it to you. Then they go further than that. They don't. They really abolish food altogether because they've got it down to some special essences which you take. Then they go beyond that, and you give yourself a certain kind of electronic stimulation, and it does all for you that food could ever do. And then you think, oh dear, what's the next step beyond that? Of course. The next step beyond that is, of course, there's one thing yet, one peduncle we have to get rid of. And that is the black box, the electronic gadget. Because by the time we have become as etherealized as that, we move into a telepathy and psychic communication. And as soon as you make that step, of course, it would seem that all privacy whatsoever has gone. Because what you are inside is an open book to everybody else. Your thoughts are easily read. And therefore, you may say at first, ooh, that is the conversion of humanity into an anthill of the worst type. And this is, in a way, naturally, what all properly educated Americans, and I will add properly educated Britishers and some other peoples, dread. It is said the Englishman's home is his castle. And everybody needs a castle, a place where you can get away from it all and just be yourself.